Today is GSD Monday, Workshop Monday. Josh Ries is here helping us, do net sheets, right, Josh? Thanks for taking the time to help us out with this.
Yeah. And so I figure we're not going to go in super in depth just to the net sheet itself because it's pretty easy to do. But what I want to do today is I want to go over the net sheet a little bit and then show you guys one way that I use net sheets to get more business, prepare myself for listings and those type of things. And that will be the GSD part of the trading. So first of all, just what is a net sheet? A net sheet is basically an itemized document that shows how much a seller is potentially going to make when they sell their home. I'm going to show you guys here, screen share. For those of you that don't know, RPR, if you're a member of NAR, you have access to RPR. They have a really cool way to do net sheets in here. I'm going to run you guys through that real quick. So you basically just put in an address. So this is our house right here. And then if you scroll down, the other thing about RPR, if you guys haven't messed with this, it's a cool tool. There's a lot of really good information in here for prospecting. You can do all sorts of stuff. We should probably have a training on it at some point because there's a lot of stuff you can do in here. But um, right here, you can click seller net value and it brings this whole thing up. So it will take like the price that it's assuming. Once again, RPR's pricing is kind of like an automated value for formula. So it's not super accurate, but it will get you close. But what you can do with this is when you're talking to your sellers and you're talking about price points of where you want to price their home to what they want to make, you can really put whatever number in here. You put in your loan amount and then put in like your agent compensation, all the escrow items. If there's any home warranty, all this other stuff that you need to put in their spots for it. They also have a seller concession spot, seller conveyances, and then other. So what you can do is you can run this, put all your numbers in, and then hit download, and it brings up, it will build you a report. And then it basically brings this up. So it gives you a really nice report you can submit to your sellers and say, hey, if we list at this price, this is kind of what you guys are looking at. Now, it's part of the reason I like using the RPR one is because they have this whole seller signature and disclaimer down here at the bottom, where you can have your seller sign it and basically say they understand this is an estimate only. And so if you're not using RPR and you're using, something you put together yourself, I would highly recommend that you put a some type of disclaimer down there just so people understand. The other thing about it is know your state regulations because some states that I know of, if you're going to be doing net sheets and CMAs, the sellers have to sign. So just make sure you're compliant with all of that. But normally, what I will do is if I'm going to have um, a listing appointment or even prior to a listing appointment, I'll try to put a couple different net sheets together at varying prices. And so we can have real numbers to look at while we're sitting down talking or on Zoom. But it gives you a really good idea of what the seller is going to make with all the other extra fees and everything. Um, so I think it's really important because I think all too often sellers want to know right away, like how much are they going to make when their home sells. And a lot of times we try to like force the issue and get like a sit down and do all that. And it almost feels, I've talked to sellers before and they say it almost feels like a bait and switch because it's like you're trying to sell them. Where if you just come in with your net sheets and you're like, hey, here are three different options, ultimately we can decide where within these options you fall. It seems a lot more salesy on the seller side of things. And I've talked to sellers and I've done it both ways before. And they have all agreed that if you come in with a couple different net sheets, like, hey, these are our different options, we can go in between. We can go higher or lower if you guys want to, but ultimately it feels a lot less salesy because you're not trying to do the whole like, well, let me sit down and talk to you and then I'll tell you how much it's worth. You just come in and plop it down and say, this is where we're at. This is what you guys stand to make when this closes. Um, So the other way that I really like to use net sheets from a prospecting standpoint is doing what are called neighborhood recaps. So this whole idea came to me a couple years ago. We used to do end of the year CMAs for all of our clients. So I would put together, hang on. So I would put together CMAs using Cloud CMAs and send it out to all of our clients. The reception was never very good on it. And so I started digging into it, trying to figure out how can we make this better. And right about that time is when Spotify actually came out with their end of the year wrapped review for their music. And I don't know if you guys have heard that story, but the CEO told a really cool story about why they started doing that. And Spotify was noticing that at the end of every year, that people were canceling their subscriptions. And they'd get to the end of the year, they'd use it all year long, then cancel their subscription. So somebody on their team decided, hey, why don't we show people the value that we've provided them through the whole year? And hopefully that will be enough to get them to not cancel at the end of the year, but renew their subscription. And so they started doing the Spotify Wrapped. And the whole premise of Spotify Wrapped is it was actually showing people actual value, the music they actually listen to, and not what they would be getting if they renewed for the next year. So I kind of took that principle into the CMA world because, as you guys know, if you're doing a CMA for a client, you're basically telling them like a what if, like if we list your home, this is going to happen. So what we started doing were what I called neighborhood reviews, where we would look at all the homes that had sold in the MLS in that neighborhood, and then we would do a net sheet on them so we could see how much the sellers had actually potentially made. You know, we couldn't get all the exact data, but you can get pretty close. And then we would put together a neighborhood report. And what we would do, I have one here. Let me pull it up, maybe. So this was for a resort area where we used to live when we were in Oregon. And this was a neighborhood report that I put together. So this was the resort at the mountain was like the community. We put all the homes sold, average sales price, and all that data. And then we basically put together a report that showed all these different homes. Most of these are in like condos. They're like mountain vacation rental properties. But we put all that data from the net sheets in here, along with some other sales data. So people could see what's actually happening in their market and not just what could happen if they listed their home. And it was really powerful because it got people into actual conversations called government camp. Yeah, that was what it was called. That was the ski resort in Oregon. Um, but it was interesting because people could see like what was actually happening in their neighborhood. And a lot of times sellers would be like, "Oh, I know my neighbor, 3 condos over sold theirs, but we don't know for how much or anything like that." So it caused a very good conversation because then we got to ask questions. We got to talk about the other comps, why they were comparable to their home, why they're not comparable, all those type of things. But it gave them a real world look of like these homes have actually sold and my neighbor made this amount of money or at least close to it. And then we could put that in with their net sheet and look at how they compared. And it was really a good data point to get everybody on the same page. The other thing that it did is it really helped with converting sellers because we came in and we actually showed them hard, fast data that had actually happened and not just the CMA. Most people go into a listing appointment when a lot of the time they just have a CMA. And CMAs are great, but especially now, sellers are having a real difficult time, I think, determining like the difference between a CMA and the automated valuation formulas that we see on like Zillow with the Zestimate and Redfin. They get those confused. So by bringing a net sheet in and actually showing what has sold in their market, I think it really kind of opens their eyes to understanding a better overall view of where the market is when they list and that type of stuff. And I think that's really important now as the market has slowed and we've got back to a more traditional market because things aren't selling in like 2 days anymore in most markets. Some are still that way, but for the most part, it's taken a little bit longer. And so you're giving your people much better data. So that's really all I have today. It's not a long training. Do you guys have any questions about the net sheets or the neighborhood reports or anything like that? I nailed it. Okay. Um, the other thing, and I don't know, I think I said this, but if I didn't, if you don't have access to RPR, most title companies will either have an app or they'll be able to do net sheets for you. A lot of times too, if I'm going to a seller, sometimes I will have the title company pull a couple net sheets for me because then it looks like professional. And I can also go into that meeting and say, hey, look, we've already talked to a title company, so I have all this data already on your home from the title company, so I'm ahead of the game. So that's another thing that can help. If you don't have RPR, your title company will be able to get you a net sheet too. And a lot of times it's kind of nice to have them do it because they're the professionals and you don't have to worry about anything. But that's our quick training for today if you guys don't have any questions.
No, but I totally forgot you've mentioned that Spotify Wrapped thing before. And I really like that concept. I think that it's important that we look at these other companies, even if they're not in real estate at all, right? And be like, how are they marketing themselves and what is working for them? And how can we make it more interesting?
Yeah. So, and I think,
Well, I was gonna say that that got me because at one of my old jobs, the like music streaming app that was allowed was Pandora. So I got that and for a decade had built, playlists of curated music and all that. But one year a whole bunch of friends were talking about their Spotify Wrapped and I didn't have anything to share and Pandora wouldn't do it. And they kept making fun of me for not having it. So I switched over to Spotify. So like marketing and all that stuff does work. So
yeah, I think anytime you can show people what has actually happened, it's a lot more powerful in a sales presentation than what could potentially happen.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Josh. I don't see Holly on camera, so I'll go ahead and close this out. When in doubt, reach out. Message us if you need us. We are here for you. We all started this morning with a blank slate at zero. So go out and find a buyer, seller, or an agent to talk to today. Have a good one, everybody.
See you later.
Bye.